People don't usually say it out loud, but a lot of us walk around with this quiet fear that we're late to something. Not late like you missed a meeting or forgot an appointment, but late in a deeper way. Like everyone else started living at the right time and you somehow showed up after the good parts already happened. You scroll, you hear stories, you remember moments you didn't have, and slowly you start to believe that there was a window for dating, for love, for figuring it out naturally, and that window closed while you were distracted or confused or just trying to survive. And the worst part is that nobody ever tells you directly that you're late. It's subtler than that. It's in the way people talk about their past like it was a rite of passage. High school relationships, college relationships, messy years that somehow taught them everything they needed to know. It's in the way advice is framed, as if everyone is already supposed to know the basics by now, as if you should have already learned how this works, and if you haven't, that says something about you. So you start to carry this quiet pressure into every interaction. Every date feels heavier than it should. Every conversation feels like a test you're already behind on. You're not just getting to know someone, you're trying to catch up to an invisible timeline that nobody ever agreed on, but everyone seems to be following anyway. Minecraft is strange like that too. You load into a world and immediately you're aware of time, even though time in Minecraft doesn't really matter. You see other people's worlds online, massive builds, sprawling bases, complex systems, and even if you tell yourself it doesn't matter, part of you feels like you spawned late, like you're behind. Like you should already have iron tools by now, already have a plan, already know what kind of world this is going to be, and even though your world is brand new, untouched, full of possibility, you can't enjoy it fully because you're measuring it against worlds that have been running for hundreds of hours. That's what dating feels like when you think you're late. You don't see the empty space as opportunity. You see it as evidence. Evidence that something went wrong somewhere. Evidence that you missed your chance to become normal at the right time. But here's the part nobody tells you, and it's uncomfortable because it undermines a lot of the panic we've built our identity around. There is no correct start time for dating. There never was. And the people you think started early didn't start on time either. They just started when life pushed them into it. Most people don't enter dating because they're ready. They enter because they're surrounded by it. Proximity, environment, timing, randomness. That's it. Not maturity, not confidence, not worthiness, just circumstance. Think about how many relationships begin simply because two people were in the same place at the same time long enough for something to happen. Same class, same job, same friend group, same dorm, same neighborhood. It's not some grand indicator of emotional readiness. It's physics. It's collision. And when those environments disappear, dating suddenly feels impossible. Not because people changed, but because the natural collision stopped happening. So people look back on those early years and call them formative, when really they were just dense. More people, closer together, fewer barriers. That's not a lesson you missed. That's a condition you were either in or you weren't. But the mind doesn't care about nuance when it's trying to protect you from regret. It simplifies everything into a story that hurts but feels explainable. I'm late. Everyone else figured it out. I missed the window. These stories feel painful, but they also feel stable. They give your anxiety something solid to hold on to. What's harder is accepting uncertainty. Accepting that there was no guaranteed path, no scheduled milestone, no universal pace. Accepting that you didn't fail to arrive on time because there was never a set arrival time to begin with. In Minecraft, if you don't rush progression, something interesting happens. You start noticing things you normally wouldn't. The shape of the terrain, the way light hits certain blocks at sunset, the fact that you don't actually need a perfect base to survive the night. You realize the world isn't asking you to hurry, it's just there. Dating is like that too. But we've layered so much comparison on top of it that we can't see it anymore. We've turned something organic into a race by watching everyone else's highlight reels and assuming they represent some universal standard. We see couples and assume they figured it out earlier. We see confidence and assume it came from experience rather than repetition. We see comfort and assume it means certainty. But most of what you're comparing yourself to is hindsight. People narrate their past as if it made sense while it was happening, but it rarely did. They just survived it, and later the story got cleaned up. There's also this quiet assumption that dating is something you're supposed to be good at early, and if you're not, you're defective. That attraction, intimacy, and connection are skills you either unlock at a certain age or permanently fall behind on. But that's not how humans work. That's how games with leveling systems work. And even in Minecraft, you can wander for hours without leveling up anything and still be fine. What actually makes dating feel late isn't age or experience, it's expectation. It's the belief that there's a version of you that should already exist by now. A version that knows what to say, when to say it, how to act, how to escalate, how to relax. And when you don't feel like that version, you assume you're behind schedule. But that version of you doesn't exist anywhere. Not in the past, not in the future. It's a projection. A character you invented based on fragments of other people's lives and the pressure of cultural noise. You're chasing a ghost and calling it maturity. A lot of people who started early didn't become better at dating. They just became more armored, more cautious, more shaped by previous outcomes. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it hardens them in ways they don't even notice until years later. Starting earlier doesn't guarantee ease. Sometimes it just guarantees scars. And starting later doesn't mean starting worse. It often means starting with more self-awareness even if it doesn't feel like it. You've had time to observe, to think, to reflect, to develop a sense of who you are outside of someone else's expectations. That matters more than people admit. The problem is that reflection without action starts to feel like stagnation. You sit with your thoughts for too long and they turn on you. They start rewriting history in a way that makes you feel deficient rather than deliberate. You stop seeing patience as neutrality and start seeing it as failure. In Minecraft, if you stand still too long, mobs spawn. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because the game assumes you're inactive. And then suddenly the world feels hostile, even though it wasn't a moment ago. Dating anxiety works the same way. Stillness gets interpreted as danger, not by reality, but by your mind. So you try to force progress. You rush conversations. You overinvest early. You treat every interaction like it has to justify the time you feel you lost. And ironically, that's what makes dating feel heavier and more exhausting than it needs to be. You're not late. You're just trying to compress something that doesn't compress well. Connection doesn't scale linearly. You can't binge it and expect the same outcome as something that unfolded naturally. You can't speedrun intimacy without breaking immersion. The people who seem calm about dating aren't calm because they started earlier. They're calm because they stopped measuring. They stopped treating each interaction like a referendum on their worth. They stopped trying to prove they were on time. And that's the real shift. Not experience, not age, not numbers. Detachment from the imaginary clock. Once you drop the idea that you're late, something strange happens. You become present. You stop narrating yourself in third person. You stop thinking about how this moment will look in hindsight and start experiencing it as it is. And presence is far more attractive than urgency, even if nobody ever tells you that explicitly. Urgency feels like need. Presence feels like openness. And those are completely different signals, even if they look similar from the inside. You don't need to catch up. There's nothing to catch up to. Dating isn't a conveyor belt moving forward without you. It's more like a field. People enter it from different edges at different times for different reasons. Some stay longer. Some leave and come back. Some wander without a map. None of them are wrong for how they arrived. The idea that you're late only exists if you assume there was a correct moment you were supposed to be somewhere else. But life didn't send you an invitation with a timestamp. You didn't miss a memo. You didn't fail a checkpoint. You just lived your life in the order it happened, and that's not something you need to apologize for. And once you accept that, once you stop treating your life like it's behind schedule, you start noticing how much of your anxiety wasn't coming from dating itself, but from the constant comparison happening in the background. Comparison is subtle. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly reframes everything you experience until nothing feels neutral anymore. A normal interaction becomes evidence. A quiet period becomes proof. A single rejection becomes a pattern, and suddenly dating doesn't feel like exploration, it feels like damage control. Comparison works by borrowing certainty from other people's outcomes. You see someone in a relationship and assume stability. You see someone confident and assume clarity. You see someone experienced and assume wisdom. But you don't see the doubt underneath, the timing, the luck, the compromises, the moments where they felt just as lost as you do now. You're comparing your internal uncertainty to their external snapshot and then blaming yourself for the difference. In Minecraft, comparison ruins worlds faster than anything else. The moment you start measuring your build against someone else's, your own world loses its meaning. You stop building for yourself and start building to close a gap that never really mattered. The project stops being playful and starts being corrective. And that's when you burn out. Dating works the same way. When you date to catch up, every interaction carries the weight of correction. You're not meeting someone, you're trying to undo a narrative you've told yourself about being behind. And people can feel that, even if they can't articulate it. It comes across as pressure, as performance, as intensity without context. This is why thinking you're late quietly sabotages attraction. Not because people can tell you're inexperienced, but because they can feel when someone is trying to extract meaning from an interaction too quickly. When you're present, you're curious. When you're urgent, you're scanning. You're looking for signals, confirmation, validation that you're finally back on track. Attraction doesn't grow well in that environment. It needs space. It needs lightness. It needs the freedom to go nowhere without that being a failure. And that freedom disappears the moment you believe every interaction has to make up for lost time. What people rarely talk about is how many relationships begin when both people aren't trying that hard. Not because they don't care, but because they're not trying to force an outcome. They're not dragging the past into the present. They're not asking the moment to justify itself. They're just there. And being there is a skill you don't develop by starting early. You develop it by letting go of the story that something is wrong with your timing. There's also this myth that dating experience compounds neatly, that every relationship teaches you something useful and transferable, like levels in a game, but real experience is messier than that. Some people repeat the same patterns for years without learning anything new. Others learn deeply from a single connection. Some relationships confuse more than they clarify, but some confidence is just familiarity with dysfunction. So when you tell yourself you're late, you're assuming that experience automatically equals wisdom and that lack of experience equals ignorance. That's not true. Awareness comes from reflection, not repetition. And reflection is something you've probably done more of than you realize. The danger isn't starting later. The danger is starting while believing you're already at a disadvantage. Because that belief shapes how you show up. It turns curiosity into caution. It turns openness into self-monitoring. It makes you treat dating like a test you're afraid to fail, rather than a process you're allowed to feel your way through. In Minecraft, if you think your world is already bad, you start playing defensively. You avoid experimentation. You stick to safe builds. You don't take risks because you're afraid of wasting time. Ironically, that's what keeps the world from becoming interesting. Dating is similar. When you think you're behind, you become risk-averse in the wrong ways and risky in the wrong moments. You rush commitment but avoid vulnerability. You overthink messages but under-communicate needs. You stay in situations that don't feel right because leaving feels like falling further behind. But there is no behind. There is only where you are. And where you are is the only place dating can ever start from. You don't need to recreate what other people had in their early years. You don't need to simulate experiences you didn't have. You don't need to force yourself into a version of dating that doesn't fit your temperament just to prove you can do it. None of that leads to connection. It leads to exhaustion. What actually helps is recalibrating what dating is for. It's not for fixing your past. It's not for validating your timeline. It's not for proving you're normal. It's for seeing how you relate to another person right now as you are. That's it. Everything else is noise. And when you approach dating from that place, something shifts. You become more honest not because you're trying to be authentic, but because you're no longer trying to perform. You stop asking what you should say and start noticing what you want to say. You stop trying to impress and start trying to understand. And that's when things start to feel natural again. Natural doesn't mean easy. It just means unforced. There's also a quiet grief that comes with realizing you can't go back and have the experiences you thought you were supposed to have, and that grief deserves space. It's okay to mourn versions of life you imagined. It's okay to feel sadness about moments you didn't get to live. I express pain and self-restraint, but mourning is different from condemning yourself. Grief acknowledges loss without assigning blame. Blame is what keeps you stuck. Blame tells you that if you had been better, faster, different, you would have arrived on time. Grief says, this is what happened and I'm still here. Once you let yourself grieve without turning it into a verdict, you create room for something new. Not as a replacement, not as compensation, but as continuation. In Minecraft, every world starts where it starts, not where another world left off. You don't inherit someone else's progress. You don't load into their accomplishments. You spawn with nothing every time, and that's not a disadvantage. It's the point. Dating works the same way. Every connection starts at zero. Not at your age, not at your history, Not at your perceived lack. At 0, two people meeting where they are. Everything else fades quickly once real interaction begins. People aren't evaluating you on a global timeline. They're responding to how you make them feel in the moment, your attention, your presence, your sincerity, your willingness to be where you are without apology. And that's something you can offer at any age, at any stage, with any amount of experience. You don't need to erase the feeling of being late to move forward. You just need to stop obeying it. Let it exist without letting it steer. Let it pass without turning it into truth. Dating doesn't reward speed, it rewards alignment. And alignment happens when you stop chasing a version of yourself you think should exist and start trusting the one that does. You're not late. You're here, and that's always been enough.